Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted. I'd also love it if you'd leave a comment. I'd like to hear what you think. I also love suggestions for videos and things like that. So I have this really long, skinny oval turquoise, and I've been wanting to do something with it. I bought a bunch of these a long time ago, and I've used a few, and I've broken a few over the years, and I thought I'd try something different with one of them today. I'm going to do kind of an ornate ring with kind of some filigree work on the sides, and it's going to have a prong setting on top holding this cabochon in place. And we'll see how it turns out. I think it'll be kind of a fun project. I've never done one quite like this, so it'll be a good experiment. Before we get started on that, I wanted to thank some people. I wanted to thank Roxy C. She's my newest patron over on Patreon, and I really appreciate her signing up. I hope that she finds the group of people over there to be as kind and as giving with their information and resources as I have found. I think it's a great group of people, and I think she'll enjoy getting to know them over there. And hopefully she can share her own knowledge and resources as well with the group. So I love that group. It's a nice group of people. So thank you all for that. The other group I wanted to thank are my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed, let's see, 12,400 and some, I think, is where we're at, which is amazing. And I never thought I'd have that many subscribers on YouTube, but thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. I also really appreciate the nice comments you leave, as well as the contributions like the super thanks and the buy me a coffee. Those things really help with the rising cost of materials right now, so thanks for that. So let's see if we can take this piece of turquoise and turn it into a ring. These are a couple of my design idea books. This is the one I'm using right now, and it's almost full. I may use this one next, but I have found in recent years that if I sketch out what I'm going to do in advance, I end up getting a better outcome. I used to just kind of go into it and start creating, but I think it helps me to get sizes right and proportions and things, which I'm not a huge fan of measuring stuff, but it does help to have this grid pattern in the background to keep me kind of symmetrical. So in my merch store, if you're interested, the newer ones have some conversion charts on them. This one has fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeter conversions. There's also one that does American wire gauge to millimeters if you need to have that kind of information handy. So, so get yourself one of those if you're interested. So here's the piece of turquoise that I have. It's 32 millimeters by 8 millimeters, so it's long and skinny. Like I said, I've had a few of these over the years, and I've broken one or two because it's pretty easy to break a stone like this that's that kind of configuration. So what I want to do here is I'm using primarily 16 gauge square wire, which is 1.3 millimeters for those of you who use the metric system. And then for designs, I'm either going to use 20 gauge or 18 gauge for these kind of filigree-ish sort of things. And that's 1.02 millimeters or 0.79 millimeters. And I kind of spent some time, I made the little platform already in advance because I kind of needed to in order to figure out the geometry of the rest of this. Because I want this to, when I curve it around, to kind of be more three-dimensional and create the side of the ring here. This will be riding on your finger like this, and this decorative stuff will be coming off the sides, going down like that, hopefully. See if we can make that happen. I sized this, okay, and this is using my mathematical abilities, which are limited, to be about a size 8 or an 8.5, and we'll see if my calculations worked out or not. I don't know, we'll find out. But what I did was I sized an 8.5, I think it was, and I lined it up on the stone here, and I used that as a guide for where this would come back together. And that may or may not be close to where I'm shooting for, but either way, I'll learn something one way or the other, and so we'll go with that. So this is going to be one side, there'll be a second side over here, and to check the geometry of it when I bent it back into the shape it's eventually going to be, where this is underneath that, We'll find out how that works, but it seemed like it was going to work okay, and so I made one side like this. I think first we'll make a second side that matches it, and then I think we can start putting in some decorations. And I'm either, like I said, I'm either going to use 18 or 20. I think, or maybe even a combination of both. It depends on how detailed I want to get. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. These little kind of flower leaf shapes there. I might just take some 16 gauge round and maybe kind of flatten them out and then file them to a taper. We'll see when we get to that stage, but let's make one of these first. Oh, I'm also going to put, I don't know if you can see it on the drawing here, but like here, 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 and here are going to be some prongs that I'm going to mount on top of this thing, and then we'll use that to hold the stone in place. So hopefully that'll be good. What I really wanted to accomplish here was, since this stone is a little bit fragile, I created that inner lip on there. I took this 16 gauge square, made it as close to as possible to the size and shape of the stone, and then I soldered in some 18 gauge on the inside of that to create a little platform. So it has a little kind of cavity it's sitting in there. If we have prongs right up against the edge, then we'll be able to kind of bend them over there and it shouldn't go anywhere. So. Okay, so let's see, we need to make these guys. And like I said, I used the side of this as a guide to kind of estimate how far it needed to be to bend around and get to about halfway up to the side of this thing. And then I used the drawing here to kind of shape these ones to that size. And I went ahead and cut extra ones because I knew I wanted to make them the same as this one. But I think we'll start by making sure this one is the same basic curve on this one here. I can probably manipulate them a little bit once I'm getting to the stage where I'm putting it all together. But I want to get them pretty close to the same. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, and I occasionally will use a little bit of easy for something, but most of the time just hard solder. And I use a liquid flux, currently using some My-T-Flux. Okay, let's set that to the side for the moment. And these kind of curve the most down here, so we'll kind of hold them and then just manually bend them a bit. The square wire, you have to be a little careful because it tries to twist on you a little bit. So when you're doing this, like that, give it just a check now and again to make sure it hasn't twisted too far. I wanted to thank all the people who've downloaded my ebook that I just put out. I appreciate your purchase. If you haven't heard of that, I just published a guide to all of my 2023 videos. It's got all of the different projects I did last year with the original sketch I did like this, and a picture of the final product, a list of materials you need to make it, a difficulty rating, sort of an arbitrary subjective one that I give it, and a link to the video itself. Oh, and some annotations, like I put some notes about the project, which parts of it were challenging, what I might do different if I was to do it again, things I learned from it. That looks pretty good. So I have the other one soldered about that much up. So I have a bunch of little pieces of solder sitting over here already from when I was making those earlier pieces. And I'm going to do what's called pick soldering. If you've never seen pick soldering before, it's a super handy thing to learn how to do. It allows you to pretty precisely place solder where you want it to be, in the amount that you want it to be. Okay, that's close enough, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll flux this, and then I'll pick up a little bit of solder off of this with the soldering pick. Then we'll heat this to the soldering temperature and just touch it where it's supposed to go. Put a little piece up right here. What I really want to do is get these to be pretty much the same. So I'm just going to fiddle with the configuration here a little bit. That's pretty good. Let's make sure it's sitting flat. Another piece goes right here. So this needs to be soldered on like that. But I want it to sit down a little bit. So I'm just going to file just a slight angle on that. Let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good, I think. Similar to the other one. Let's solder that together. So I did a typical beginner issue on this when I stuck the solder in there too soon before the second piece had reached that soldering temperature there. And so it just jumped onto the one wire that was hot enough. I have a tendency to get impatient sometimes when I'm pick soldering and I stick it in there a little bit too soon. But you need to make sure both pieces are up to the soldering temperature, which in this case is 1450 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly. One of the things I think about when I'm going to put a decoration in here is when I start shaping it, is it going to distort the decoration too much? I think let's start with the little flowery looking things. Let's, I'm going to make a silver ball out of some scrap wire, I think. And then we'll solder maybe some 16 gauge round in 4 spots like that to it. And then we'll pound them flat and file them and see how they look. I think that might be the best way to go. Whenever you're melting silver to make little balls, charcoal block is a good way to go. 18. So they don't need to be huge, pretty small really. I'm just going to kind of eyeball them. Whoops. I always make a few extra because I'm invariably going to knock 1 or 2 of them off the table. me see if I can find some 16 gauge round. Thought I saw some in it earlier. Let's try sweating a little bit onto the ends of these and then attaching them. See if we get a neater attachment. Sweat soldering is where you pre-attach some solder where you want it to be. So like right at the end of this wire. That way it's stuck to at least one of the surfaces. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So, a couple of things I did off camera to experiment is I used the flat side of one of my dapping punches to direct the force to flatten those out a little bit more readily without hitting the ball part in the center too much. And then I used my rotary tool with an abrasive white wheel, a knife edge white wheel, and kind of shaped those into more kind of leaf shapes. So I'll make these two to match that, and then we'll start making these other pieces and we'll solder them in. So I got these tapered a little bit. They're not perfect, but once you polish them, they're going to be all kind of pretty symmetrical, I think. And this thing is going to have to go kind of in the center there. Like that. So I'm going to solder those all in like that. And then we'll start adding the other components. And whenever you're soldering something big to something little like this, the big piece is going to take longer to get up to the soldering temperature than the little piece. So you can kind of actively avoid the smaller piece until the very end. Most of the mass is in this outer part. We want to solder this one in, centered. Like that. So let's solder him in. So I'm probably going to do this side, and then I'll do the other side off camera, so you don't have to watch me do the same thing twice. Then we'll come back and we'll assemble it all. Presupposing that I succeed at this, which may or may not happen. Now we got to think about these other things. So we've got just a little curly cue that goes from either side there. Let's see how 18 gauge looks like when I do that. Like right like that, I think, actually. That's pretty close. See if we can do something similar for the other side. Need a circle. Let's make a little circle, a couple of little circles. I'll make an extra one for the other one too, because I need to be very big. I think that's fine. Let's solder that in. If I put that solder seam against the side here, that'll save me having to do that separate. You still have some solder over there. Awesome. Need to create something that's kind of crimped in the middle and then curls around to either side. So let's make a sharp end, kind of like that, and just curl it around to either side. Alright, so the biggest question is going to be how will it shape when I go ahead and shape this, but for now I'll let this pickle a bit and then come back and do the second one, but I'm not going to make you watch me do that, and then we'll see if we can start piecing this together. Okay, so I got the second one made, and now I'm going to solder these two together at the bottom like that. I'm not 100% sure this is the best way to do this, but that's what we're going to try this time. There's likely enough solder in there to solder it together anyway, but it hurts to have some extra. Alright, I think I'm going to bend this around a ring mandrel and see how that looks. This is where we got to do some weird twisting now. kind of pushing up over here and pulling down on the outer edge, so it kind of creates sort of a domey sort of shape here. We'll see how that works. I think that'll work out, but we'll find out. Here's that little platform I made earlier. Needed to fit kind of right like that. So I think we're going to have to turn these ends in a little bit steeper. I can spare just a little bit probably. So if I file these both vertical, I think that'll get them to line up pretty well. And then I can work on getting this flat so I can mount this on top of it. Okay, I think that'll work. Let's figure out a way to do this without having anything fall out. Magnesia block maybe? Alright, we'll see if we can't get that soldered on there. I may use, I'm going to probably use hard solder to solder some posts to this, and then I may use easy solder to solder to the top of that thing once it's all shaped. That is presupposing that I succeed at doing this part right here without messing it up. That's not looking too shabby. We're very close to where I want it to be. That looks pretty good. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to file this as flat as I can. Okay, so like I said, oh, we need to put some prongs on here first. So these are going to become my prongs. I need to bend them downwards. About right there. Quit moving on me. Pretty close. So if we just bend those downwards, that. Same way on these ones. Make sure they're torqued in the right direction. It might be easier. Never tried this before, but it might be easier to mount two of them and then worry about the other two afterwards. Now that we have those first two attached, it should be easier to line up the second two. Pretty good like that. Let's see if we can get that one. I might need to adjust that one a little bit, so let me make sure I have some solder here. So I'm going to pre-melt some easy solder. I have some paste here. As long as I can get that out of there. I'm going to flux this, even though you're not supposed to have to flux it. I like to make sure we get a good flow. I also need to flux the bottom of this, probably. All right, let's try that. Still got some gaps there. Okay, I'm going to let that pickle for a bit, and then we will set that stone at the end after it's polished. So I got everything all kind of polished up. I cut these off on the top, and I think we can go ahead and set this. I'm in there first. Make sure he's kind of sitting in that trench we created. We can start bending these over just slightly. I'm going to cut these off just a little shorter, and then I'll trim them to their final length after I get these kind of laid down over the stone. Like I said, I've broken a few of these stones before, so I'm trying to be a little careful with this one. These long, skinny ones sometimes can be a little delicate. Okay, so probably I'll cut them off about right, like that. So the last thing I'll do is I'm going to take the Dremel and I'm going to kind of taper these down to a point, and then I'll smooth them out with a fine blue polishing wheel on there, and then we'll get some better pictures. So that is pretty much what I was going for. So, all right, well, that was the elongated oval cabochon ring with an ornate design. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did enjoy it, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And take a moment and check out a few of my other videos. I have well over 330 videos now. There's tons of different content there, not only for beginners, but also for people who are more advanced as well. And I think there's almost certainly something you can find there that you'll find valuable and useful. So check them out, and then maybe give me a subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. The other thing is, make sure to check out the video description down below. You can find a link to that ebook that I just published if you'd like. It's a great resource with lots of information about those particular projects. And there's also a link to my merch store for if you want to get yourself one of those design idea books that I showed you. My website's there, a link to my Patreon. There's a link to a safety video. There's also a link to Pepe Tools even, who I am an affiliate of now. So check that out. Buy yourself a pretty rolling mill or something. Either way, thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing. Take care.